Today's reading is from Day by Day, the teachings of Sri Ramana Maharshi. Sri Ramana said, "Unless and until a person embarks on this quest of the true self, doubt and uncertainty will follow their footsteps throughout life. The greatest kings and statesmen try to rule others, when in their heart of hearts, they know that they cannot rule themselves. Yet the greatest power is at the command of the person who has penetrated to their inmost depth. There are people of giant intellect who spend their lives gathering knowledge about many things. Ask these people if they have solved the mystery of man, if they have conquered themselves, and they will hang their heads in shame. What is the use of knowing about everything else when you do not yet know who you are?" People avoid this inquiry into the true self, but what else is there so worthy to be undertaken? Paul Brunton, who was a writer who was there in the hall that day, said, "That is such a difficult, a superhuman task." And the sage shrugged his shoulders. He said, "The question of its possibility is a matter of one's own experience. The difficulty is less real than you think." Brunton said, For us who are active, practical Westerners, such introspections," and he became silent, the sentence trailing in midair. Sri Ramana continued, "The realization of truth is the same for both Indians and Europeans. Admittedly, the way to it may be harder for those who are engrossed in the worldly life, but even then one can and must conquer. The current induced during meditation can be kept up by habit, by practicing to do so. Then one can perform the work and activities in that very current itself. There will be no break. Thus, too, there will be no difference between meditation and external activity. If you meditate on this question, who am I? If you begin to perceive that neither the body nor the brain nor the desires are really you, then the very attitude of inquiry will eventually draw the answer to you out of the depths of your own being. It will come to you of its own accord as a deep realization. Know the real self, and then the truth will shine forth within your heart like sunshine. The mind will become untroubled, and real happiness will flood it. For happiness and the true self are identical. You will have no more doubts once you attain this self-awareness." Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So I love this passage from Day by Day. And because Ramana here, Sri Ramana is reminding us always that in some ways this doesn't take a great deal of effort, but it does take persistence. But when we think that we want to do something persistently, we often think that we have to do it with effort. And what he keeps saying to us over and over is just to keep quiet. And so this is what he's pointing to always in this passage and in others as well. That if we just come to this place of recognition, even on a conceptual level of who we are, and then we persist in keeping quiet, eventually recognition of who we are as the true self will come to us. So he ends our seeking immediately as well. And this is quite contrary to even to a lot of spiritual teachings which say you must effort, you must practice, you must do this. That this is something that you can attain. But Sri Ramana's position is you already are that. You just have to keep quiet until you recognize it. I don't know about you, I find this encouraging. Be persistently lazy, and all will be well. So does this passage, this reading resonate for you? Yeah? Good.
persistent with, which essentially is the practice. So is the stillness the, like, not finding the answer? I mean, when does the stillness come in, or the, quote, laziness?
So the stillness is always there. The inquiry is the way for us, the question, who am I, is the way for us when we aren't experiencing it as our natural state.
Okay.
So what this means is, as you can notice, if you begin to notice your own mind or your own actions throughout the day, there's this persistence of the idea of me. And this is with us all the time. And often it's going through the mind at the same time, right? I like this, I don't like that, I want to do this, I don't want to do that, I have to do this, no, I don't need to do that. So this I is constantly our companion, this me-ness, what we experience as our life, my life, right? This is mine. This idea is always with us, but over the course of a lifetime it becomes so subtle that we barely notice it anymore. But as soon as we begin to notice it, we start to get the idea that we are either overtly or covertly referencing this I all the time. We're comparing all the experiences we're having, all the thoughts we're having, all the emotions we're having all the time to some imagined I or some ideal I that we'd like to bring forth. This is one of the reasons we take up spiritual practice. We say, this me is inadequate, I need a different me. I want a better me. I need to improve this me. And so we take up some sort of spiritual practice. And this helps us can help us for a short period of time or for a long period of time. Doing mantra, practicing various kinds of breath control, doing all of the things that are common in spiritual life, centering prayer. All the traditions have some form of this. But most of them don't ever ask the question. And when I say I, or when I experience myself as a me, or I say this is mine, what am I referring to? You see, that assumption of reality that me or mine is real is never looked at. It's avoided, in fact, right? Because this is the purview of the mind. It's the territory of what we call ego, right? And so, not wanting to be challenged in that way, ego or mind prefers to have us step over this question. What am I referring to when I say I? So what Sri Ramana has brought to us in his understanding is that the way to understand something about this me and this mine is to go in the opposite direction and ask, what am I referring to? Who am I? What is this I? And in doing so, this stops the outward flow of our attention into the body, mind, and world. And not that this is a bad thing, it's just not the way to realize who you are, right? Because you'll be distracted with an untrained mind. You'll be distracted by all of the occurrences that happened in body, mind, and world. And you will continue to believe and to reinforce the idea that you are me. And so his way of undermining this whole process and bringing us back to the silence that you mentioned is to ask the question, who am I? And then just wait there. Right? Because this, as you pointed out, this is not a question that the mind can answer. It can definitely make the attempt, and there are practices in all of the spiritual traditions, but particularly in Buddhist practice, where you can scan every molecule and cell of the body using the mind. You can start at the top of the head, go all the way to the feet, turn around, come back, and just keep doing this, and it just keeps breaking down this relationship between me and this body, right? because you can look, if you can become precise enough and you can become concentrated enough, you can look at very, very small pieces, if you will, of the body, and you can see that there is no I anywhere. Even if you were to look at each particular cell, you can't find me, right? So it becomes very clear that you're not the body. It becomes very clear that you must, at the end of that practice, you must be something other than the body. Well, the natural tendency of the mind is then to say, as it does throughout all of our lives, to say, well, it must be my mind, and I must be my mind, right? And as all of us know, we keep looking at the mind, we keep following the mind, we keep doing what the mind says, we keep projecting what the mind says, and we just become exhausted. So this also works there. Eventually we find out, wow, this mind isn't me either. It can't be. I can look through all my thoughts, and my thoughts can tell me, oh, this is me, whether that is good or bad, right? I'm a saint or a sinner, it doesn't matter, whatever the mind is saying. Ultimately, you come to realize that it's just a thought in the mind. What I mean by just a thought is it doesn't remain. You can hold the thought, I am a saint, or you can hold the thought, I am a sinner. You can hold the thought, I am me, whatever that means. This is mine. You can put great effort into holding on to that thought, but as we all know, thought disappears. In a moment of not paying attention, right, of not giving attention to thought, that particular thought that I'm holding, it disappears. And no matter how much I tell myself I am the saint, I don't become saintly. It's just a thought. Right? No matter how much I try to prove to myself that me is some sort of a sinner or some sort of a defective person, I can't hold on to that. And I notice that when I'm in a moment of spontaneous joy, or I'm out in the forest, or I'm at the beach, or I'm with someone that I love dearly, this thought that I'm a horrible person, or I don't get it, or I don't understand it, or whatever, is not there. So no matter how we try to hold on to the thoughts of our worth or lack thereof, that thought leaves, so it can't be the mind. We can see this very clearly if we take the time to see it, right? We have to put a little bit of attention into seeing this. We can't just go through, well, we can go through life one experience to another and keep shifting the idea that, well, maybe this is me, maybe this is me, maybe this is me. And undoubtedly, we've all done that a lot. But it's the end of that, right, the collapse of that effort that brings us here to this question.
I've been pondering that question, and one of the answers that came, which is, I haven't deconstructed it yet, but is that I'm an ever-changing experience, because those thoughts and,
Yes.
and the body, and it's always changing.
Yes.
And so that's not satisfying, but it's kind of uncomfortable,
Yeah.
that idea. But that's what my mind came up with.
Yes, but that's what all the sages' minds come up with. All of this is impermanent. So how can I cling to it? Why should I bother? Right?
Then it becomes very futile.
What becomes
and doesn't negate it.
What becomes futile?
My existence, or who I think I am.
Yes. Yes. And how do you respond to that? To the sense of futility?
Depression.
Depression, she says with a laugh. I think you've understood something deeper than that.
Sometimes. That's ever changing.
But now you have to understand that if what the mind tells you is that what you're experiencing now is depression, then understand that the mind has shifted the focus of me from all the stories you were telling yourself before, which have now become futile by your own definition. Because the mind does not like to know that everything is impermanent. It's looking for something permanent. So you've just
Mhm.
found out through your own inquiry that it's all futile. Everything that you've been clinging to in the past, right? But the mind becomes so panicked by that, it now goes, well, then I must be depressed. Why? Because it wants something that remains, that is not impermanent, right? Now your effort has to be put into just saying, this is also not true. Who is depressed? Right? You continue the inquiry.
Sure.
Who is saying this? When the mind says, now I am depressed, again, who is being referred to when I say I? You see, this just continues to go. Now the difficult part about what you're expressing, right, is that this place where the mind is saying to you, and it's very personal, now I am depressed. Right? This looks like a very dark place. And after all, we start our spiritual life, we're looking for light, right? We're looking for love, we're looking for freedom. We're not looking for dark, black, depressed. But this is why persistence becomes necessary, and this is the place where we apply it. So we continue with the inquiry, knowing that what the mind is still saying to me is not the truth. However it labels it, right? So you can say, you are a saint, right? You are enlightened. It can also say to you, now I have nothing left but this depression. In both cases, this is the mind speaking. So we continue. We recognize that. And the reason that we talk about the end of doubt being the end of this process is because that kind of a declaration, now it's all futile and now I'm just depressed, then we know this is not the end of the inquiry. Right? This is a very good indicator. Because the end of the inquiry, as also the end of mindfulness practice in Buddhism, is that all doubt is removed. Now these kinds of thought messages, thought patterns, they don't rise anymore.
I would have to trust that, though.
Yes.
That somebody else has truly experienced
Yes.
the end of doubt for me to
Yes.
move on.
Yes.
Or continue.
Yes. And this is the reason why it's always helpful along the way to continue to participate in our world with sages, with the lessons that they have, the things they have discovered about themselves and about all of us. So we continue in association with truth, right? Through this difficulty. It's one of the foundations. So we keep coming to satsang. Satsang means association with truth. So that's what we're doing here. You're coming here, you're saying, yeah, this is what's happened over the last 2 weeks or so, and this is what I'm seeing now, right? And what's fed back to you, or what's given back to you is, yeah, keep going. Yeah, you're getting there. Yes, what you're saying is absolutely true. So there's reinforcement of your own experience, but there's also the encouragement to keep going.
I think the other part that kind of helps me trust the process is that it's about my own inquiry.
Yes.
I mean, it's nice that there's other people who have an experience that they can share is
Yes.
possible.
Yes.
But that I don't just have to take the word for it, so to speak.
Yes.
It is really about me coming to understand this myself.
Yes.
So I have that going for me.
Absolutely. That's a very good ally to have, you know? Because if you say, and the Buddha said this and so did Ramana, if you say, and I'm saying it as well, if you understand that sitting here, reading a book, watching a video, listening to someone talk is not going to get you there, you're miles ahead. I know people who sat in satsang or sat in meditation for years, don't understand anything about who they are. Because they thought they didn't need to make an effort. They just needed to keep coming. And for some, that possibility is always there. But it always happens, if we want to use this word, more quickly for those who understand, I can do this myself. Right? Because the true sage will always say to you, if I can do this, you can do this. And because I did it, doesn't mean you understand anything. You have to do it. But I can show you the way. Very good. Keep going. This is such a good indicator. You can hear in her voice, and that for those of you that have been here a while, the difference in her voice now and her voice a few months ago, and in the way that you are moving, if you will, right? This is something else the mind interprets, a movement of some sort, a letting go or whatever.
So one other question then.
Okay.
I still find myself not real healthy. I mean, you say you hear something in my voice, and I'm glad for that. I tend to want to negate it because I still am going through a bit of insanity
Yes.
and unhealthy behavior, really.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know why I bring that up. Maybe to negate what you just said.
Absolutely. So understand the mind talking now. Are you hearing it? Now is the time to go. Right? You can hear it. It's all okay. But the one that you're trying to convince is this mind that's afraid that it's going to be destroyed. Know this very clearly. Right? If I were to say to you, you are going to be destroyed today, you'd run out the door. This is what the mind is doing. It's attempting to run out the door. It doesn't want the insights you're having. It doesn't want you to experience yourself as confident and self-reliant because of this old conditioning, this underpinning that you have from the past. And so it gives you this. It says, let me knock what he's saying down. Let me, negate everything he's saying right now. Before she comes to believe it's true of her, that she's confident, becoming more healthy, understanding herself, So understand very clearly what's happening. And keep swiping it away. Not this, I'm not this. These thoughts are not the truth. And then ask the question, what is the truth? What is aware now? Who am I? Just keep going in whatever form of the inquiry has brought you to where you are now. Just keep going. But you really are at that place now in your understanding and in your experience where you can say to the mind that's kind of saying those kinds of things to you, this is not the truth. In other words, you can counter it right then in the moment. Right? You don't need to come to satsang, tell me what you can, keep coming. You don't need to come and keep bringing those things over here so that I can say, well, that's not the truth. Right? You're now at a place where you understand what is the difference between your own experience in the past of personal pathology, maybe we could call it, and you can simply keep saying that is not the truth. Who am I beneath all of that? What is here before all of that? Right? This is why it's often said that awakening, you see, is not something you become. It's the shedding of what you are not. Right? But when I say it's the shedding of what you are not, the impression that can come through that is that this is a fluid procedure, right? Shedding. You're just letting everything go easily. But what truly happens is that shedding starts and then the mind goes, No, 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 no. I don't want to let go. No, I'm not letting go yet. You know. Oh, I haven't understood this. Oh no, I don't have this right. You can't trust this guy. You know, this is what the mind does. So it's not a fluid thing. But you see, understand that it doesn't matter whether you wake up in this moment fully and completely and you never go back to the personal, or whether you just have a momentary glimpse. It doesn't matter in a certain way. As soon as you've had that momentary glimpse, which you have because you're undertaking this practice. So even you think you haven't understood a thing, you've been coming for months, you're doing this practice, you're getting results. So there's a part of you knows, has this glimpse. This is what keeps you going. Right? So even you just have a momentary glimpse and then you fall back into your old habit patterns. So what? This is persistence. When the old habit pattern comes back, you swat it aside and say, not this, not this. Don't make a big deal out of it. You don't make a big deal out of what the thought, what the mind is doing to you, saying to you, trying to get you to believe in again. You just simply say, no, not that. So there is an element of trust in this. And for some people, that element of trust is already strong within them. And for other people, it's better to come somewhere like this, and that element of trust begins to build very slowly. Because someone keeps saying, persist, persist, persist. So initially you might say, well, you know, I can't really trust this monkey mind, but I can trust her. So I'll go and sit with her, I'll go and sit with him, and slowly it'll be all right. But where is that trust coming from? You see, even to say, oh yeah, I'll just go back week after week and sit with that person. Even I just sit in silence. And then you'll hear the mind say, but you don't trust anybody, you don't trust yourself, this is not true. If you're coming every week, you're trusting something. Even you can't name it. Right? So good, very good. You know, for some of us, it's very, very possible to just completely stop like that. You know, completely, the mind just stops, boom. And for a lot of this can happen when we come to the cushion, especially if we've been sitting for some time. We take the position, and just putting the body in the position instructs the mind, okay, stop. Others of us can only stop for a split second and then the mind takes off again, even we're sitting. But this is why we just keep coming. You know, this is why we persist in this. Is because over time, mind begins to follow body. Body and mind begin to follow the intention. Or to follow the trust. To follow the one who says, in some way, you already are that which you are seeking. But we come to this silence, to the quiet, we still the body, we find some place in our house to sit quietly for 15 or 20 minutes or an hour each day. And we discover that this silence, which before, we were looking all over the place for it, trying to find out where is happiness, we come to understand that it's actually within us. And you know, you say you can't sometimes know this, but I've been sitting with you a while. I can feel this. The difference from the first time you came here, or the first and second time you came here, until now. You see, one of the things that happens for us is that this silence begins to grow within us, but it's not perceptible to the mind. It's often perceptible to others around us before it's knowable to us. I can remember spending years when people said to me, "Oh, you're so quiet. It's just, it's so peaceful and calm to be around you." But I knew what this monkey mind was doing, you know? And so I was doing what you were doing, which is saying, but this can't be true, you know? This isn't, I don't feel this quiet, I don't feel this silence. Well, that's partly because you're still looking at feelings, looking at thoughts, right? Looking at sensation in the body, which is, as you said, never permanent, continually moving, which has this quality of sort of going against stillness or silence. It's not actually true. This is the way the mind perceives it. So don't be surprised if other people begin to say things to you that your mind wants to argue with. So if I say to you, no, I can see, I can feel the difference. This may become true for you, that your co-workers and your friends and family may begin to notice changes in you before you do, because you're so intimately involved with your own mind. But as soon as you fully embrace this understanding of impermanence, that all of these thoughts, all of these emotions, all of these tendencies are simply floating by, and you begin to notice what it is that's noticing, that nothing is permanent, right? That everything is always moving, then you will begin to understand completely what's being pointed to here. So this first step that you've taken, which says, oh man, there is nothing that's permanent. When you talk about, in the past you've talked about this, the way that the mind is crazy making, when you understand fully the depth of that insight that you've already had, that everything is impermanent and you can't cling to anything, then your freedom is just right there. Now you no longer cling, right? So then simply letting everything go, even without the words, not this, not this, not this, this just becomes your way of being. And that crazy making that the mind was doing before was, you understand and see completely, was always related to the attempt to keep something permanent. Better to be permanently disturbed than to be impermanent. You see, this is the mind's game.
There's some safety in that for some reason.
Yeah, there is somehow some safety in that. Yeah. But see, understand that this is everybody's mind. You see, people are laughing all around because this is everybody's mind. You know, we all think we have the corner on this kind of stuff going on in the mind. We have no corner whatsoever. It's all going on to everybody, or most everybody. So now you can also let go of that, your own sort of specialness, because you have, you have this monkey mind, but then you begin to understand that everyone has monkey mind in the beginning. And it is the very recognition of its impermanence which takes away its power. So, very good. of the characteristics that we need to notice as we begin to become more and more aware is that we have this ability to remain alert in the gaps, which is what just occurred. That a gap showed up. And for the most part, you all stayed just right here and remained alert. Our tendency in the past has usually been that when we experience a gap, we become very uncomfortable in that gap. And in an ordinary state of awareness, we fall asleep in that gap. So it's wonderful to see you all sit here and just let that gap unfold. This is the outward sign of silence. Even when the mind is not completely without thought, that you're able to allow the gap to just show up in your life at some moment. You might be driving your car or sitting in your house or at work or something, but you suddenly realize that there's a stillness around you. Even the mind is still moving. This becomes really possible when you begin to see that thoughts are impermanent. Everything is flowing like a river, and your job is just to sit there on the bank. It's not to push the river in one way or another, but just to sit there. That you can, throughout your day, notice the gaps that you naturally fall into between thoughts and between doingness, and allow yourself for just a moment or a few minutes or an hour just to be, when the gap opens up for you quite naturally. But you don't need to force the gap, you don't need to look for the gap. But if you don't keep yourself perpetually busy, like a hamster on its wheel, these gaps will begin to show up naturally. And then you just learn to fall into them and to keep quiet. And they begin to open up for you and to expand. This is when you can begin to really touch your own silence. Because you're moving against that tendency of the mind that when there is a gap, when there's nothing really intense there to look at, you have to create something. You have to give yourself something to do. You have to create something even when it's a disturbance to your natural silence. So this is very good. More of you are becoming able and willing. This is the biggest part. You're all able. It's the willingness that often isn't there to just let the gaps of your own natural silence to show themselves to you. This is what Raman is talking about in this passage, about that willingness to just be there. That question, who am I, leads us only to silence, only to the recognition that I am here, I'm alert, I'm aware. I am aware that I am aware, and now I am just here. So, very good. the natural tendencies when the mind begins to fall into these gaps is it will begin to tighten. So right now, notice if when we're going in and out of these gaps, is your mind, when it feels or senses that gap, does it relax or does it tighten? In other words, does it try to find something to concentrate on? Because if you notice that the mind starts to tighten, then you need to consciously relax the mind and intentionally open the heart as you are here, alert in this moment. In some ways, it can be said we're looking for that balance point between heart and mind. Once we locate this balance point between heart and mind, and we wait there, then our natural silence, our natural samadhi, our natural way of being can just open for us without us doing anything. Just by waiting at this intersection between heart and mind. Becoming more and more comfortable in this alert silence.
I notice in this relaxing more of an ease in my body.
Yes.
Like there's less like holding. And that came with like a decrease in pain, of physical pain. And I just like to hear more about that. Because it still hurts to be in this body.
What more is there to hear about it? Keep relaxing the mind. Keep falling into the gap. See, what you're starting to see, what you just saw, is that the source of pain isn't in the body. It's not from the outside in. It's from the inside out. So the more you free yourself of the structure of mind, the beliefs, right, the underlying beliefs and so on, not through effort, but through returning to the natural silence, the more you can see that as the mind lets go, the body relaxes and opens. You see, everything is mind. This is a basic underpinning of spiritual understanding. Everything is mind. This is true in Zen, it's true in Chan, it's true in Advaita, right? It's true in Vipassana. Everything is mind. So what you're doing when we do this kind of a recognition of our own innate, alert silence is we're freeing everything that comes from the mind, from that contraction. When you talk about feeling pain, what you're really talking about, and actually you described it that way, is it's the contraction that's going on in the body.
Mm-hmm.
So when the mind is relaxed, and the pain in the body is only an indicator that this contraction, which you've been feeling in the body, which originates in the mind, has been going on a long time. That's what pain is. Pain is the body telling us we're tight, we're contracted, we're constricted, we're armoring, we're defending. Right?
But even releasing that contraction it can hurt less, but it doesn't make the body work better necessarily.
And do it more than once.
Okay.
Understand that if you've been holding a contraction in the body, which you're experiencing as pain, throughout a lifetime,
Yeah.
or longer.
There's some that are just like today, but there's some that have been decades.
Right, and so these take persistence, because understand, I keep using this word all the time, persistence, because understand that the way of the body-mind is that it structures an identity out of its habitual experience, right? And then once it makes a decision that this is who I am, it forgets that it got there by saying, this is who I am, and pointing to the habitual thinking and the habitual way of being as a body or a mind. Okay? So all we need to do now, this is not necessarily a quick thing, but you just demonstrated it. Even to give the mind a moment of rest, right? Right away can translate to the same moment of rest for the body, right? So now you've seen that.
Yeah, and the moments can
So
be
don't,
long.
right, but don't dissect it, just keep falling into it.
Okay.
Right? And I understand, especially I know because I know you and I know what what your life has been about and what your business is about and so on. And so when we talk about being helpful to other people, being in the healing arts, doing these kinds of things as a way of existing in the world, there can be this sense that if I keep doing this, I'm actually working against myself or against my success or against my ability to help other people.
I'm not worried about that at all.
Just know that it can come up.
Okay.
And it can cause you to halt wanting to go for your own sake into this place of rest and relaxation.
What I wanted to say before was the reason I trust this tradition so much is because it's so scorched earth. Like, absolutely not one thought.
Yep.
Not even that last little one that you don't want to drop.
Yep.
That makes me trust this. It's like persistent ruthlessness, leaving nothing.
Yes. But understand that mind has been persistently ruthless in the other direction.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So this is not something which is new to you.
No, like
now this persistent ruthlessness that has driven you into the corner, which has brought you here,
yeah.
becomes your near ally.
Yeah.
This is why I'm always encouraging you, don't underestimate the power of your own dysfunction.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I was tortured by my mind. And that just popped the suction on my loyalty to it.
And
like,
as soon as you realize it wasn't your dysfunction, that it was the infinite, the supreme, pointing you to the end of your suffering, to the realization of being.
Had enough yet? Had enough yet? Yeah.
Very good. Keep going now. Again, it's not a long way to go. Just keep returning. You've had that experience. You won't forget it now. Just keep returning to that.
You said something about laziness earlier. I'm really lazy about it. I don't have, it's not on my to-do list. I'm not, like, I don't try to meditate 20 minutes a day or anything. I'm dropping that too.
Yeah. It's only important to pick up the tools that we need, that we can use, that we get some sense by using the tool immediately that this is the way of truth for us.
Satsang.
Do it. Yeah. Or falling back into your natural silence. You have a direct experience of that, then you will persist in it. The only reason other different kinds of techniques are talked about here is because there are different personalities here and different things work for different people. Yeah. And at different times, under different circumstances. I remember when I was reading a lot of Ramana's, the things that, the books that had been written day by day, and the books that had been written about his teaching. These were all books that he didn't write. He never did that. These were books that other people who sat in the room with him wrote down in bits and pieces and scraps and notebooks, and then eventually it was all put together into a book. And in the beginning, when he was younger. Now remember that Ramana awoke to this truth of his own being. He was only 15, and he left his home. He abandoned his home, went to Arunachala, and sat in a cave and in temple haunts for 4 years in silence, and didn't move. Whenever there was a problem, they needed to move him, the other yogis would have to come and pick his body up and move him somewhere else and put him down. And out of that experience, when he was just 21, started to come this teaching, which he just wrote down on scraps of paper as people asked him questions. Because he had understood what it is that we're all facing, and he understood that there was a universal application for it, that it was not my mind that was engaged in this difficulty, it was mind itself, and that everyone who hasn't taken the time to fall into this silence of their own being experience the same difficulties of the mind when it struggled and so on. And I remember reading back through through his writings, through the things that were written, subscribed to him, and thinking to myself, in some ways this is so simple, but it's its absolute simplicity, which is that fierceness that you talk about, right? Take no prisoners. It's like you almost have to, right? While saying at the same time, you don't need to make a huge effort. If there is an effort, it has to be in this direction of understanding that your mind has nothing good to say to you. And the sooner you stop paying attention, the sooner you'll come to this place of understanding who you are.
about to offer these fresh figs from a tree in a greenhouse where I'm staying. If anything, like a fig. Like cold and right off the tree.
This is my absolute most favorite.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah, so balanced.
Om Triambakam Yajamahe Sugandhim Pushtivardhanam Urvarukamiva Bandhanam Mrityor Mukshiyamamritava Swaha Bhuva Bhu Om Sat Jung